Most people think they crave sex. They feel the urge, the pull, the restlessness, and they assume the body is asking for release. But according to Carl Jung, this is one of the most common misinterpretations of desire, because sex is rarely the root. It is the language the psyche uses when something deeper is missing. When you crave sex intensely, especially during periods of emptiness, confusion, or stagnation, the psyche is not asking for pleasure. It is asking for connection. Not connection in the social sense, connection to aliveness, to meaning, to feeling real again. This is why sexual craving often spikes when life feels dull, when purpose fades, when identity feels uncertain, when motivation slows down. The psyche looks for intensity, and sexuality is one of the fastest sources of intensity available. Jung understood libido not just as sexual energy, but as psychic energy, the force that animates the personality. When that energy has nowhere meaningful to flow, it concentrates itself into instinct. That instinct feels sexual. But what you are craving is not sex itself. You are craving felt life. This is why sex sometimes disappoints even when you get it. The urge disappears briefly, but the emptiness returns, because the act satisfied the body, not the psyche. The psyche does not want stimulation alone. It wants integration. This explains a confusing phenomenon many people experience. They want sex more when they feel bored, not when they feel fulfilled, not when they feel grounded, but when something inside feels hollow. Sex becomes a substitute for meaning, a shortcut to feeling alive, a way to escape silence. But silence is often where the real need lives. Another reason sex feels so urgent is because it bypasses thinking. It dissolves the ego temporarily. For a moment, you stop asking questions. You stop doubting yourself. You stop feeling fragmented. That relief is powerful. But it's temporary, and the psyche knows it. So it asks again and again. This creates a loop. You think you want sex, but what you really want is wholeness, to feel gathered instead of scattered. Jung warned that when instinct is used to compensate for inner disconnection, it becomes compulsive, not immoral, not wrong, compulsive. Because the psyche keeps using the same channel to deliver an unmet message. That message is simple. Something essential is missing. But most people never ask what. They only chase where. A new person, a new fantasy, a new body. And for a moment, the craving quiets. Then it returns, often stronger. This is not addiction in the chemical sense. It is symbolic hunger, the psyche using sex to point toward something it cannot yet name. When sex becomes a craving instead of a choice, it is usually carrying something else with it. The psyche rarely speaks directly. It speaks symbolically. and sex is one of its most powerful symbols. According to Carl Jung, when psychic energy cannot find expression in meaning, purpose, or self-realization, it regresses into instinct. Not because instinct is bad, but because it is the fastest available outlet. So the question is not, why do I want sex so much? The real question is, what is sex standing in for right now? For many people, it stands in for validation. To be wanted is to feel real. To be desired is to feel chosen. To be touched is to feel seen. When self-worth is unstable, sexual attention becomes proof of existence. This is why desire intensifies when confidence drops. The body asks for what the psyche lacks. For others, sex stands in for power. During sex, you feel influential. You affect another person. You matter. If life has made you feel small, ignored, or passive, sexual desire becomes a way to reclaim agency. Not consciously, symbolically. Then there is safety. This surprises people. But many sexual cravings are rooted in the need to feel held, grounded, and soothed. Sex lowers defenses. It quiets anxiety. It temporarily dissolves isolation. If emotional safety is missing in daily life, the psyche seeks it through physical closeness. This is why people crave sex more during stress, loneliness, or uncertainty. The craving is not for bodies. It is for relief. Another hidden craving beneath sex is identity. Sex answers the question, who am I? At least briefly. Desirable, powerful, alive. When identity feels unclear, sexual desire becomes a mirror. You don't just want sex. You want to feel like someone again. This is why desire often spikes during life transitions. After breakups, career confusion, midlife shifts, periods of slowing down. The psyche is reorganizing, and while that happens, identity weakens. Sex steps in as a temporary anchor. But anchors are not foundations. They hold you in place for a moment. They don't tell you where to build. This is why acting on sexual craving without understanding it often leads to disappointment. You get what you wanted, but not what you needed. The body is satisfied. The psyche remains hungry. And then people turn against themselves. They call themselves weak, undisciplined, addicted. But Jung would say this is misplaced judgment. Nothing is wrong with your desire. What's missing is interpretation. Desire is not a command. It is a message. And when the message is ignored, it repeats, louder. This is how healthy desire becomes compulsive, not through indulgence, but through misunderstanding. When you begin to ask what sex is compensating for, something shifts. The craving doesn't vanish overnight, but it loses its urgency. You start noticing patterns. When it rises, what precedes it, what it quiets. Awareness returns choice, and choice transforms desire from a trap into information. When you stop chasing sex for relief, something subtle but powerful happens. desire begins to slow down, not because it disappears, but because it no longer has to shout. According to Carl Jung, when psychic energy is understood, it reintegrates. And when it reintegrates, instinct no longer needs to compensate for what is missing. This is the turning point most people never reach. They either suppress desire and feel dead inside, or they chase it endlessly and feel empty afterward. But when you understand what sex has been carrying for you, validation, power, safety, identity, the craving changes its form. You may still want sex, but it feels cleaner, quieter, chosen. It no longer feels urgent. Urgency was never desire. Urgency was lack. When lack is addressed directly, through meaning, self-respect, honest connection, inner work, sex stops being a substitute. It becomes an expression instead of an escape. This is where many people are afraid. They worry that without craving, life will lose intensity. But what actually disappears is not pleasure. It is desperation. You don't become numb. You become grounded. Sex no longer carries the weight of fixing your life. It no longer has to prove your worth. It no longer has to silence your emptiness. And because of that, when it happens, it feels fuller, more present, more human, less hollow. This is what Jung meant by integration, not control, not purity, but consciousness. Desire that is conscious does not rule you. It informs you. And when desire informs instead of commands, you regain something essential: choice. You can want without chasing, feel without losing yourself, connect without disappearing. That is the difference between craving and desire. One enslaves, the other participates. Once desire stops being used as a replacement, it reveals its original function. It stops pointing outward and starts pointing inward. This is the moment most people never reach, because it requires patience instead of action. When sex is no longer used to soothe emptiness, prove worth, or escape silence, the psyche redirects that energy elsewhere, not upward into ambition, not outward into pursuit, but into depth. Carl Jung described this as a return of libido to the self, a reallocation of psychic energy away from compensation and toward individuation. In simple terms, you stop leaking energy through craving. And when that happens, several quiet changes occur. First, your relationship with your body changes. You stop treating it like a tool for relief. You start experiencing it as a place of presence. Sensations become slower, more grounded, less frantic. Second, your attraction patterns shift. You're no longer magnetized by intensity alone. Chaos loses its charm. Availability becomes attractive. This confuses people at first. They mistake calm desire for boredom. But it isn't boredom. It's nervous system stability. You're no longer aroused by what destabilizes you. Third, imagination changes. Fantasies lose their compulsive edge. They stop looping. They stop demanding enactment. This doesn't mean imagination dies. It means it no longer has to compensate. Fourth, and this is the most important shift, self-respect returns. Not as pride, not as discipline, but as an inner boundary. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making excuses. You stop using desire as a reason to betray your own clarity. This is when desire becomes dignified. It no longer begs. It no longer pulls you out of alignment. It waits to be invited. This is what mature sexuality looks like psychologically. Not repression, not indulgence. Consent from the whole self. Most people think this kind of integration will make life dull. But what actually disappears is the noise. What remains is depth. Moments last longer. Connections feel real. Silence stops feeling threatening. You don't need constant stimulation because you are no longer running from yourself. This is why people who integrate desire often feel calmer without trying. They don't control sex. They no longer need it to carry their unresolved weight. And because of that, when sex happens, it's no longer empty. It's present. If this video helped you see your desire differently, don't rush to change anything. Just notice. Notice when the craving rises. Notice what it follows. Notice what it quiets. Awareness is already transformation. If this resonated, like the video, not for the algorithm, but as a marker of understanding. Subscribe if you want psychology that explains desire without shaming it or glorifying it. And if you're willing, comment honestly. What do you think you've been using sex to replace? The answer to that question is where real change begins.